How's it going, everybody? It's Polyflame, and we are back with another FPL sort of related video. And today we're going to be continuing our series that we did last season. A lot of you enjoyed it, and that is the Tactics Talk series, where we go through one game. Typically, it's going to be one of the bigger games of the weekend. In this case, it's Man City at away to Spurs on the opening day of the season. Obviously, a lot of speculation around if Kane is going to go to City. He wasn't in the squad at all, and we'll take a look at the lineups as we normally do. But it was very interesting to see the tactical battle as Spurs were able to nick the game 1-0 and come away with 3 points with their fans back in the ground. If you do enjoy these series, make sure to hit the like button, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new, and turn those notification bells on so that you can get the content as soon as it is readily available. Drop us a follow over on Twitter, and join our Flames Recruits League so that you can keep up to date with any posts and that sort of stuff, as well as it has a potential chance to become the Flame Lord, as it were, for the Flames Recruits League. And lastly, give us a follow over on Twitch so that you can see when we go live for our preview and deadline streams. We'll be doing a preview stream tomorrow, 7 p.m. EST, to talk about Game Week 1, as well as look ahead to Game Week 2, as we normally do. And our deadline stream will be back normal. It'll be 5 a.m. EST start time, 1 hour before the FPL deadline. So without further ado, let's talk about our partners for the season with Fantasy Football Scout. We have partnered up with Fantasy Football Scout for this coming Fantasy Premier League season, and they're giving you an exclusive offer. Use the link down in the description to get 20% off your Fantasy Football Scout membership. It gives you access to the exclusive members area, which has new tools such as the 3-player comparison tool, as well as some old favorites such as the Rate My Team tool, the Season Ticker, and my personal favorite, the fully customizable stats tables, which you can share among other Fantasy Football Scout members, powered by Opta Stats. Use the link down in the description below to get 20% off your membership today. Sign up now. So as we normally do, we have our tactics board out in front of us here, and we're going to go through how City and Spurs played against each other. This is how they lined up in the second half. Spurs were attacking the left goal, and City were attacking the right goal. In the first half, it was the other way around. But for the most part, nothing really changed until the substitutes kind of came in. They mostly played similar to how they were going to play throughout the entire game. The first sub, I have my notes here on the side, I believe was around the 60 something minute for City. No, it was 71st minute. It was when Sterling came off for Gabriel Jesus, just after they took the free kick. Originally, it was supposed to be Mars that came off. But this is how they started out. So Man City with their typical 4-3-3. They had Jack Grealish playing in this kind of left half space, this left center midfielder. And often what you would see is if they were in attack, Sterling would hug the touchline, Mahrez would hug the touchline, Gundogan would support, Torres would kind of roam or drop off the line if he needed to, and Grealish would come in here, depending on which side of the ball was where the ball was. So let's say if the ball was over on this left-hand side with Sterling, you would often see Cancelo filling in the midfield here, and basically creating more of like a 3-2-5 kind of in attack. It's often what Pep's teams do. They have one of these fullbacks that often fill in here. Sometimes you would see the likes of Gundogan come in here as well, and you would see Mahrez step into this role and Cancelo go wide. And you would see that mirrored on the opposite side with Mendy, Sterling, and Grealish. Often, though, Grealish wasn't the one to drop off. He was constantly staying in this area until later portions of the game. That's typically what City often do. They were mostly building out with, quick passes. Torres was, often getting frustrated and having to drop off. Same with the likes of Gundogan, same with the likes of Grealish. But what they want to do is they wanted to progress the ball as quick as they could. They wanted to use the creativity of Jack Grealish with his, ball running ability, as well as Mahrez. If we want to talk about Spurs now, let's put them in position here. So you'd often have a situation where maybe Grealish had the ball here. Mendy was in more of like the back three kind of shape. We'll put Diaz right there. Gundogan we'll put in here. Fernandinho in here. Cancelo, we'll put him out on the touchline with Mahrez right here. And we'll put Ferran Torres somewhere in here. Now, what you often saw was the likes of Mora and Son and Bergwijn, who were in this front three kind of shape. They would press as a three. And what they would do to try to kind of thwart City from passing the ball quickly is make sure that they just don't get a free pass. They're not just able to blow by them, and they were effectively the first line of defense. Now, the real key to all of it was the likes of Dele Alli, Oliver Skip, Emil Højbjerg, and Tanganga. So City often found the ball out on this left-hand side, and Nuno's team defended and counterattacked in a 4-3-3 system. There was no real change on that front. If they were building out from the back, we'll talk about that in a second. When Spurs did get a little bit more of the ball towards the latter stages of the first half in possession. So what would happen is if Sterling got the ball out on this left-hand side, if it was either Sterling or Grealish, Højbjerg and Tanganga were touch tight to them. So basically what that means is when they receive the ball, they're basically, if they have any slight of a loose touch, Højbjerg and Tanganga are either scything them down or they're stripping the ball off them or knocking it out of touch. And that's exactly what happened with specifically Mahrez, Grealish, and Sterling. But we saw it more prevalent out on this right-hand side. You often saw Grealish getting fouled in this area, Sterling in similar positions. And I thought Tanganga and Højbjerg on this side were fantastic on that front. And what would happen is if the ball was here with Fernandinho and Gundogan, you would see the likes of Ali and Skip kind of let them do what they wanted to. And just basically kind of hovered in between the two players. But the second the ball was passed, if it wasn't passed quick enough, Højbjerg and Tanganga often found themselves right up and close and personal with Grealish and Sterling. And you would find that City often got quite frustrated, which is why towards the latter stages of the second half as well, and the basically just the second half in general, they were very, very sloppy in possession, which is why Spurs were able to counter. So I'm just going to move the City players back into their positions here really quickly. And I'll be able to show you kind of how Spurs were basically looking to kind of play when they had the ball in possession and how they were looking to counter. So, Nuno Espirito Santo set up in a 4-3-3 system. He had Son playing as the out-and-out number 9. He was not a false 9. He was often running through the middle, but he would have license to kind of fluctuate on side to side and help whichever side the ball was on. So if the ball was with Lucas Moura, he would often try to make a run towards him, and Bergwijn would kind of wrap around the back, and vice versa on the opposite side. So when they were in possession or building out from the back, you would often see Tanganga kind of support the midfield. Reguilón would support the midfield. Sanchez would split. Dyer would split. And Skip would drop into this into the back line, making it kind of like a 3-4-3 when building out from the back. And Skip did quite well. I thought he played really well in this role, and I think it suits him quite nicely as well. But in defense, what you would see is Tanganga would often, like I said, be touch tight. Moura and Son and Bergwijn doing a lot of hard work, hassling the three center backs and pressing. And then in defense, Højbjerg, Skip, and Dele were given a very, very simple but effective way when defending. Højbjerg and Dele was if Mahrez or Grealish or Sterling got the ball out in this like left-hand channel out on this side over here, get them down or take the ball off them ASAP. Make sure that they have no breathing space whatsoever. Now that can be quite dangerous because the likes of Grealish, Sterling, Mahrez, very tricky attacking players and can dribble past anybody. But if you don't give them the time to do it, or you could just take them down, it stops the momentum. And you saw Grealish getting frustrated. He got booked in the game as well. Mahrez just didn't really get that much joy and was supposed to be the guy getting subbed off first, but they changed their mind and made it Sterling. Sterling often was getting dispossessed, somewhere in this sorts of area, like never really getting in the box either. So it was really interesting to see. Now why can't I move these? I can't move these, but it's okay. We'll deal with it. But often in this space on this left-hand side and mirrored on the other side, you could see the likes of Grealish and Sterling getting frustrated, more specifically And it caused them problems. It definitely caused them problems, and it was often where Spurs would be able to pick up the ball and break. And Spurs typically, most often, they only broke with 3 players. It was most specifically Moura, Bergwijn, and Son were the 3 players that were breaking. And it was only the likes of either Dele Alli or Højbjerg that would often join the attack, and it would often be quite late. So they left the front 3 to their own devices. And typically, in the transition, the likes of City had Diaz and Ake, and then one of the fullbacks, we'll just say it's Mendy, and they had Fernandinho kind of up against them in most cases. So it was a 3v4, but the problem is that if you have the likes of Son, which we'll see on the first goal when we go to show that, he had a situation where the fullback, in this case it would have been Mendy, wasn't covering. And you need to recognize that when they have these 1v1 scenarios, but you have the man advantage, you can force the issue on their best player, which is Son. Which was definitely the interesting part. If we just put it back to the regular formations here, the changes that came in were as follows. So the first change came from the likes of Man City. Now, when I saw the change, I thought, good, it's a good change. They brought on Gabriel Jesus. But what Pep did is he took off Sterling, and he just kept Jesus out on the left and kept everything pretty much the same, which I don't think was as effective. I think Torres, when he went out to this right-hand side when Mahrez came off, he was a lot more effective. And Nuno's counter to that was that he brought off the likes of Steven Bergwijn and brought in Lo Celso. And Lo Celso kind of didn't really play out on this left-hand side. He kind of just packed the midfield even more so that players that, you know, if Jesus was just going to hold the width out there and you were going to have, you know, Grealish and Gundogan trying to make runs through, Lo Celso was just going to be in there to win fouls, basically. And then it was more of a... Moura and Son were kind of operating in these sorts of areas on the break and kind of just being a two-man break. And that's when you saw Dele kind of getting a bit forward more on the break as well. And Lo Celso was kind of playing as like another midfielder. And Dele and Lo Celso were often finding themselves in different positions. Towards the end of the game, you often saw Dele down in this channel here as well. Doherty came on as well. He was just a straight swap for Tanganga. Nothing really too crazy there. Romero came on for Højbjerg, and he dropped back into create a back three with Dyer and Sanchez. Nothing really too crazy there when you're trying to hang on a lead. But I think they were going to actually take off Son initially, which would have just left Moura out on his own. But then the real change that kind of sparked the game a little bit, that allowed City to have a couple of chances, Grealish's chance and Torres' chance, in the second half, came from this as well. Mendy came off in a straight swap, but De Bruyne was the one who came on, and what it meant was Grealish went out to this left-hand side, Mahrez came off, Torres went out to this right-hand side, De Bruyne came in this left half space, and Jesus basically took up a position in the 9. And then you had the likes of Grealish and De Bruyne linking up on the side here, and you then found De Bruyne and Grealish creating chances in this part of the box. And Torres was often finding much more success getting in and around these sorts of spaces in the box where his chance eventually came from. And he kind of fluffed his lines a little bit. And had he had better contact, he might have been able to steer it goalwards. And we found him being a bit more direct, you know, running in behind and getting runs into the box in here as well. So I thought that City's game plan was pretty clear from the start. First 15 minutes, they looked very lively. Spurs were on the back foot, but they held out well. We saw that on the break, which we'll talk more about on the actual goal itself. It was a break of 3 players, and it's just defensive mishaps at the back, like coverage-wise for City, that just didn't really work out. The recognition there was just not great from City's defense, and you can get punished for that. They were fantastic. And then lastly, from more of an FPL perspective, just because Grealish was playing in this, in this position where De Bruyne was, he was often finding himself in and around the edge of the box or in this space in the box as well. So I think at 8 million, he could be quite good. Ferran Torres, obviously false 9, was obviously finding himself often in the center of the box. I think no matter where he plays, I think Ferran Torres could be a great price at 7 million if he were to start. Cancelo, another good FPL asset last season. Often found himself making late runs, and he actually had a shot very early on, somewhere around this position, which was just wide. So I think he could be good for 6 million as well. On Spurs' front, I think that Son is probably the only major FPL consideration. Delhi, for I think he's 6.5 million, was kind of playing more of a defensive workman-like role. So unless that changes, we'll have to see. But Son was playing as the 9. He was on literally every set piece. We presume he's on penalties as well. For City, when De Bruyne was off the pitch, it was Mahrez from the right side. It was, I think it was Gundogan from the left-hand side. Yeah, they were doing both in-swingers, which was interesting. And then when Zinchenko came on, he was doing out-swingers from the left-hand side, and De Bruyne was doing out-swingers from the right-hand side. So they switched that up completely as well. And then lastly, Bergwijn obviously had a fantastic chance. He's definitely someone to be on the watch list as well. I think he's only 6 million. So if he's able to be a bit more on the finishing end of things, he could easily be just as good as Son on the break for much cheaper of a price. So I think that could definitely be interesting there as well. And just because of the longer balls that Spurs played with their counter-attacking style, I feel that Son, if he scores in like a low-scoring game, he's going to be on bonus almost certainly every time. Whether it be Son, whether it be Mora, whether it be Bergwijn, they're going to be on the bonus. And I think for City, they didn't score any goals, and Jack Grealish was, I think he's like either on for 1 or 2 bonus points as well. So that could be very interesting because of the amount of chances they can create, the half chances they can create, because they're just City and they create a lot of chances. But yeah, that's the interesting part. In terms of tactically, let's talk about the fancy part of it, the goal that Son scored for the only goal of the game in Spurs' 1-0 win. Now, this was the setup for the goal that Spurs scored on the counter versus Manchester City. I just have a diagram off to the side of me, so I'm going to kind of take you through it as best I can. So, basically, Mendy here on this left-hand side was in this position and kind of dropped off after he put in a cross. The ball is then attacked as it deflects out towards the top of the box. Is attacked by Skip and Ferran Torres. Skip ends up winning the header, which then drops to Lucas Moura as he drops off the front line and gets the ball in this sort of position. Now, what he does is very inventive. He does basically a flick with his right foot, which goes up and over his shoulder, kind of loops it up and over his shoulder, and is able to spring Bergwijn into space. Now you can see why this would be very problematic. Son's got the 1v1 versus Ake. Bergwijn will eventually have the 1v1 versus Diaz. So let's see how that kind of transpires. So Moura comes in, Fernandinho follows him, flicks it up and over his shoulder, and then Bergwijn picks the ball up in this position. Now Cancelo, he reads the danger quite well and comes across. Diaz kind of drops off into this position, and Ake is dropping off the entire time as well. Son kind of goes with him in a sense because Ake kind of follows him in a bit. Mendy eventually drops off and kind of swoops in to this position here, and then slowly drops back into the box. And it's actually Mendy who I think kind of doesn't help Ake out as much and causes a bit of an issue. So we'll just clear the board here. So Bergwijn ends up driving with the ball through the center of the pitch. Diaz always dropping off and in this space here. Ake dropping off as well. And then finally, Son gets the ball around this position, released out to the flank. So Son ends up getting it around here. Ake goes and follows him. Diaz is dropping off all the time. Bergwijn is coming through the middle. Mendy tracks back, and as before the ball, or just after the ball is played to Son, he's around this position and then kind of makes his way towards the box as well. We also have Moura bursting through the middle with Fernandinho tracking him all the way. Cancelo at this point has kind of consolidated in the center. And you have this cluster kind of on the break where it's kind of a bit of a mess as Son's kind of forced out wide, and you think City should have the situation under control. Now, Mendy ends up in this position at the edge of the 18. Ake's out here as Son is taking the ball out from the touchline after receiving the ball and slowly dribbling it inward. Diaz picks up a position somewhere just behind the penalty spot. Cancelo is in here around the penalty spot-ish area as well. Bergwijn is at the top of the 18. Mora also ends up being around the top of the 18 as well. And we'll just kind of look at these players. Tanganga ends up being he's kind of in this sort of area before Son cuts inside. And Ali makes his way. Ali and Gundogan also make their way around here-ish as well. I think Gundogan's kind of somewhat behind, and Ali ends up being in here. By the time the ball goes in the back of the net, they're not really involved in the play, though. So, what happens? We see the situation here. 1v1 isolation. Ake, as a note, is left-footed, which means that he is going to have better defensive coverage in this area here. He's going to be able to clear the ball or be a lot more comfortable if he steals it off Son if Son goes to the line. Now, Son is right-footed, so that would favor Ake in a 1v1 duel if both players were equally skilled. Problem is, Son's a lot better than Ake when it comes to attacking versus his defending. So, what does Son do? Ake backing off all the time, and Son finally gets to like the corner of the 18, and that's when he makes his move. Now, this is where we're going to highlight it. So, there's all this space right here. All of this space. And no City player thinks, well, Son's the only player there. Tanganga's here. If Tanganga gets in this area here for a cross, it becomes a situation where even if Bergwijn, Dele Alli, and Mora all get in the box, right? And Ake goes and follows him, and then Son maybe comes into this area. Mendy can just drop off and follow Son, and they still have numbers to defend the cross. Fernandinho can get in there. Gundogan can get in there. The cross isn't the issue in this case. So Tanganga's not really a threat. If he goes to the byline, he's going to have difficulty crossing it because Diaz, Cancelo, and even Fernandinho, but mainly Diaz, is in position to basically block anything that comes across. The real issue here is that Son is capable of shooting on both feet. And if Son gets in this position here, which is what he's looking at, which Ake doesn't think he's going, Ake's like kind of giving him, he's not really like side on to him. He's not looking straight at him to where Son's only direction is. He either goes backwards this way, or has to go like around him. If he goes line, he can go straight line and then he can whip in across. That's probably a bit better for Ake anyway, because he can then block with his favorite foot. What happens is Ake positions him kind of square on and thinks, well, if you go this way, if you go down the line, I'm cheating because I'm using my favorite foot and I can defend better with that. And he just doesn't give him the respect that he probably would need coming inside. Or the alternative would be that he thinks that he has cover because he probably saw Mendy check. He probably checked over his shoulder and probably saw Mendy was going to be somewhere around this area here. Problem is that Mendy's way back here. Mendy drops off and is expecting Son to go line and cross it. Because up until this point, Spurs really hadn't, like, Son had gotten a couple of chances where he was able to get into a channel, and then they kind of recycled the ball. City were often defending the potential cross. So what happens? Son gets the ball, cuts inside, gets to this position here, and he's gotten the pace, the beating of Ake. Mendy kind of realizes, damn, I'm in a very bad scenario here. Fernandinho's looking at Bergwijn. Ederson is obviously positioning himself for a potential shot or a ball played in this area in here. And this is the space that you can see where Son is able to shoot through. Diaz kind of slides across a little bit. And what Son does is he uses the likes of Mendy to bend the ball around into that far corner there. Diaz just can't shuttle across. He's kind of got his hands behind his back, so it's a little bit difficult to shuttle himself across like 2 to 3 paces and kind of block it with his thigh. Now, there's a chance that it could have glanced off his thigh and gone in the goal anyway, but he's just not able to get across in time, and that's probably mainly due to the fact that he's probably potentially looking at Bergwijn, because if Bergwijn darts in and makes a run here, he wants to be goal side of him, and he's kind of following him here. But if he gets in and around him, then it could also cause some sorts of problems. And also, you would think that shots from this, this area here aren't as threatening. But yeah, that's exactly what happens. So Son cuts inside. Mendy's not there as a double team, potentially, to press Son and force him back or force him line with Tanganga, in which case they have a 2v2 out there, which you would think that City would probably favor, potentially. But Son cuts inside. Beautiful shot, uses Mendy, goes past, ignore my squiggly line, goes past the left-hand side of Diaz and finds itself in the bottom corner. Ederson doesn't see it until late based on his reaction, because he doesn't even dive, and the ball finds the bottom left-hand corner. And that's how Spurs were able to hurt City quite often on the break. Bergwijn also had a chance where he was in this position here, pretty much 1v1 with Ederson, and fluffed his lines a little bit. But often you saw the midfield of Skip, of Højbjerg, and of Dele, they were just kind of harrying, as well as Tanganga, in these sorts of spaces, getting the ball back off of Sterling, off of Grealish, or scything them down and creating set plays where they were favoring themselves to defend, as they probably had the height advantage. And they were getting the ball in positions where they could counter. And that's all they needed to do. Once they got the 3 men on the break, with a potential supporting 4th member like Dele Alli or Højbjerg, they were favoring themselves to nick a goal as long as they were solid defensively. In the opening 15 minutes, as we mentioned previously, it looked a bit rough for them, but they held out quite well, and City didn't really create 2 cut chances, I don't think. Torres probably had one. Grealish's one was decent, but overall, I think Spurs defended well as a unit. Their shape was fantastic. Nuno kept it simple, kept it basic, used a workman-like midfield, which is something we don't really know of or relate to when it comes to Dele Alli, but he did that role perfectly. He even looked to try to 2-foot a City player on the break towards the very end of the game, which was quite funny. He just whiffed it completely, so I had a little laugh at that. But overall, that was Spurs' game plan. They knew City were going to have a large portion of the ball. They were going to hit them on the break, and they wanted their qualities 1v1 versus their backline, which without the likes of John Stones, without the pace of Kyle Walker to track the likes of Son, I think they did quite well on that front. Spurs-wise, City-wise, a little bit left to be desired. And it definitely wasn't an avoidable goal, but you could see it coming based on the chance that Spurs had throughout the game. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, and let me know what game you want me to do next week going into Game Week 2. And that's going to do it for this episode of Tactics Talk. If you did enjoy this series and you did enjoy this episode, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and turn those notification bells on so that you can get the content as soon as it is readily available. Drop us a follow over on Twitter if you want to keep up to date with all FPL transfer news, as well as when we post content. And join our Flames Recruits League is in the Twitter bio as well. Also, give us a follow over on Twitch so that you can see when we go live for our preview and deadline streams. There'll be a pinned comment down below to let you know when those are happening next. And lastly, take advantage of the link in the description below for Fantasy Football Scout membership. I think it's still live for 20% off, and if it's not, I think it's only £20 for the entire year. It's a fantastic offer, so make sure to take advantage of it. You get access to a wide range of tools and data that allow you to up your FPL game. Thank you all for watching, and until the next one, take care.